Welcome to The Third Opinion, presented by Full Circle Health. Join us each week as we delve into the world of integrative and functional medicine through discussions, interviews, lecture series, and more. Our experts have been on both sides of the Western medical system and understand the frustrations associated with getting real answers about all of the available treatment options. Well, we are here to give you the answers. We'll take the time to break down the latest holistic and integrative medical procedures, supplements, and discoveries to help you better understand your body on a molecular level. Please keep in mind, this podcast was created for educational purposes only and should never be used to take place of a medical diagnosis or treatment. As always, make sure to take the time to submit any questions or comments you may have about today's show so we can give you the answers you need. Now, let's get healthy. Right. Good morning, natural health and truth seekers. It's Dr. Adelena for the Third Opinion podcast. And joining me today is Burt Palmer. Good morning, Burt. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Doing well. Thank you.
Good. Well, I am obviously very excited for our time together today. I wanted to take a brief moment just to say hello to any of our avid listeners. And if you are listening in today and maybe you are experiencing unresolved tiredness or fatigue, pain, or maybe you're feeling a little bit spiritually disconnected in your healing, well, this conversation is for you. So I am going to kind of share a little bit about Burt, who is the founder of Healing Seekers. But I'm going to kind of read through his bio, if that's okay with you, Burt. It's always fun to listen to your own story being read back to you. But Burt is a dear, dear friend of mine, as well as a patient. In 2003, Burt founded Palmer Construction Consultants, and this is a corporation, our firm specializing in structural engineering and construction inspections. However, by 2004, he had noticed some of his struggles with addiction and had led to some struggles within his family's dynamic. And over the next several years, really, he felt like his life was falling apart. He was at a place where he had to sell his engineering firm. He had, ultimately experienced stressors amongst his family, his friends, and he kind of knew that he wasn't going down the right path. And even though there were so many individuals that were reaching out to him and telling him that he could, get that help that he was potentially seeking, he resisted and he felt lost. But in 2010, he felt like maybe he hit what we would call, in our layman's terms, rock bottom, and he had gone into a rehab facility for drug and alcohol. And over the next 2.5 years, he really went through all of the process and the steps that, ultimately we see with AA meetings and just the road to recovery. And he ultimately started to feel like himself. He was like, I'm reconnecting with my family. I'm learning how to live life away from these things that were skewing my perceptions. And in 2013, he had completed the recovery program and he had served as an intern counselor. He was really helping others to their journey to sobriety. Through a lot of his learning through AA is really also why Healing Seekers is so near and dear to his heart. But it's almost like he felt on top of the world. And then yet again, life had a different kind of picture or trajectory in mind. He, although has resolved a lot of his family's complex and such, he, went back to work. He started hitting that hard. And let me tell you, he has built a very, very well off company. And at that point, he had remarried. He was in the process of getting remarried, and he had a health challenge that ultimately he had to face. And in about 2016, he underwent some severe GI issues. And over the next 7 years, he endured multiple surgeries, lived in chronic pain and debilitating symptoms that disrupted nearly every aspect of his life. And he can further elaborate and express onto that. But not only was he stressed to the brim in the sense that he was the primary breadwinner, he also had to endure all these physical challenges, but even emotionally in the sense that he thought he was healed, right? He thought he had maybe changed the trajectory of his health, and all of a sudden, there were different plans in place. So in 2020, he after 4 years of living that way, he'd lost over 100 pounds. He had numerous life-threatening moments. He had chronic bowel inflammation, just debilitating GI. He just decided that he was going to live in pain. And it was very strugglesome to think that that was going to be the rest of his life. And he then realized, similarly to his journey with addiction, that it was time to connect to his spiritual side once again. And so in 2020, he began his healing journey with a wonderful pastor leader in our Healing Seekers group, Ewell Hardman, and it changed his life. By July 2024, he had, after years of prayer and perseverance, he was able to dramatically change his health. And, he would speak to it as a miracle, as do I. And he now is able to eat more foods. He's not in pain anymore. And he then, as much as he is, the primary breadwinner of his family, he had to change and shift his life. He had to rebuild his business. He had to do all these things, everybody. He then decided, I know that the purpose in my healing and my journey was to help others. And so he created Healing Seekers as a reflection to say, hey, there are other people that need to find this version of healing. And really, I just get so overwhelmed with emotions, even just when I learned about Healing Seekers, because it was honestly, in my opinion, a lot of things that a lot of patients or people undergoing hardships are lacking in their healing journey. Unfortunately, they don't understand how spiritual healing has such like grounding efforts to the rest of it. So was there anything I missed out on in your intro, Burt? Anything you would like to share?
I think you did a great job. You probably told it better than I could. I liked hearing it, so I appreciate you saying that. It
Definitely.
did. The getting sick in 2016 really caught me off guard because I guess I had the belief that I had overcome addiction. So hey, life should be great from here on out, and it just didn't turn out that way. But it actually turned out better in the long run because I was able to resolve a lot more issues than I did my first go round. Thanks to you and Mr. Hardman, it really helped get me on the right track.
Well, and I feel honored that you even mentioned me. So part of why I have, extended this, invitation for the podcast is because I see patients in chronic places in their healing journeys all day long. But my experience with Burt was so different. And I'm going to share a little bit about that, Burt, if it's okay with you. So
Yes.
Burt and I have a shared provider, so friend, a mutual networking individual that, reached out to me and said, hey, I have a patient for you. I don't know what you can do for him. We've worked with him for several years. He's got chronic illness, digestively speaking. And so, at first I was like, oh gosh, I don't know what I'm going to get in myself into. Right. And I said, of course, bring him in. And Burt and I did our initial consultation together. He had expressed his journey. And even in that 30-minute free consultation that I offer to any prospective clients, I was able to just feel this different aspect of readiness when it came to Burt, when it came to his willingness to, even when I explained kind of the steps in the process that falls it within natural medicine and functional testing and factors like that, he was like, let's go. And it was almost a different experience because there's always this, not even skepticism, but this hesitancy for trust and for hope that so many patients ultimately have endured. And I was one of the last steps in Burt's healing journey, it seems like, because he has gone to every GI, every doctor under the sun before he had met with me. So, the fact that he was still willing to share his story and be open to what healing really entails, it stood out to me amongst any other patient that I said, well, this is a little bit different, I thought to myself. And so it's crazy to think that we started working together. What is it, 3 years ago, Burt, now?
March of 2023.
He's like, I remember it. And in that time, we underwent very different type of assessments. We did functional stool testing. We did in-depth comprehensive blood work. We did food allergies, genetics. Avenues and layers that have never even been a conversation right before us meeting. And at every which step, there were moments where we had to adjust and reconfigure our strategies together. And I think that Burt's openness to what healing really inquires was so different to me, because he had already endured so much in his healing when it came to addiction, that he kind of understood that it's not always linear. It's going to be hard. There's going to be episodes where things maybe get worse before they get better, but we're very open in our conversation and our rapport together, which I think really influenced how we were able to pivot when life or health concerns shifted. Maybe, there was a product that he wasn't able to tolerate to the fullest, and we had to learn together. And I think that that was such a different experience, because a lot of patients would have given up, and Burt was like, okay, what else can we do? So I always can state that there was something so different about working with Burt as a client, because there was this spiritual groundedness that came when you presented to me. And so I know that you were already within your healing journey with with Ewell, right, Burt?
Yes.
And so you've already undergone so many of those conversations and really trying to understand why we got sick, right? And so a couple questions that I have for you is that before you underwent those health challenges, how would you have described your relationship with faith or prayer?
My relationship with faith and prayer really changed when I entered treatment in 2010 for addiction recovery and alcohol recovery. It really steered me in the right direction. I worked really hard at the AA program and the steps and making amends and trying to overcome my defects of character and become more aware of the barriers that I faced from an emotional and spiritual standpoint. So it was an ongoing process. I think maybe I had fallen out of that a little bit by 2015 or 2016, but it was on an upward trajectory from the most part from the time that I decided to get sober.
Well, and I mean, and that's obviously, I can't overextend how grateful I am for your vulnerability and kind of explaining this, because it is hard, but it's what makes us, what makes you you, right? And so I just think that so many people have this misconception when it comes to healing. It's also recognizing, these are the health challenges and struggles that have led me to this place, right? And so even when we underwent and did our intakes together, like I had to go all the way back to what your mom's pregnancy with you was like, where you grew up. And that's why, hence the beautiful accent that Burt always speaks that I don't even recognize anymore. But when I first met Burt, it was definitely, I was like, where are you from? Like, I couldn't tell. And so he has a very distinct accent. And, so I had to learn everything that led Burt to that healing, kind of challenge that he was seeking my support out to. But even to this day, we always go back and talk about those layers in your healing journey, even prior to the digestive, because there's something to holistic medicine. We got to look at it all together. We can't just look at the episode in time, because there are factors that could have potentially led us to that, right? And so I guess my question for you is, how did AA and basically that support of community support you emotionally on the days where your body wasn't necessarily cooperating?
It was very important. Are you talking about in the addiction recovery days or after I got sick and I
Well,
was
a little
trying
bit
to
of
work?
both, because I know that part of even what led you to that spiritual foundation when you got sick was because you knew that that was a piece within your addiction journey as well. So I guess my question is, how did you see prayer influence you emotionally so that you could physically potentially endure those hardships?
The three cornerstones of AA are willingness, open-mindedness, and honesty. And I knew when I came to see you that I had to be willing to do whatever you asked me to. I mean, I had to be at the point where I was ready to receive the help that you gave me. So that was ingrained in me. Also taught me the effectiveness of sharing in a group, sharing openly and honestly, and being vulnerable about your trials instead of these defense mechanisms that come so naturally to people. So there were those two things, and the third thing was that I knew God had a purpose. And although it seemed really, really bad at the time, my belief ultimately was that God wanted us all to be happy. And so that directly contradicts what you may naturally feel when you're sick and hopeless and you feel like you just can't get well. You see it as, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to me. I'll never get through this. I have nothing to live for. So it really helped change my thinking about it. It helped me contextualize it in a positive way instead of a negative way. I guess ultimately I got to the point where I had to be willing to give it all up and face it with a positive attitude, even if the outcome was unknown. So I think that's where the real spiritual growth comes in, because that's releasing all the fears and the expectations and sort of handing them over to God to let Him do as He will with the situation. So that's where I was for a long time. And, it's a great place to be because it absolutely refocuses every facet of a person's life when that level of surrender is achieved. Now, I hope that answers your question.
Even it answers it and more. I mean, the fact that I obviously am very fond in divine intervention, and I do feel that there was a reason why Bert and I didn't meet at the beginning of his episodes in his journey. It almost feels like he had to endure those strategies almost to get to the point where natural medicine was really the best support for you, because that willingness, and let me tell you, you guys, the willingness when it came to Bert's healing journey is just what astonishes me. And he always tries to put it back on me like I helped him, and I would say it's mutual, but there was just this layer that I don't see in many of my patients, unfortunately. And it was just something that I had to inquire further. And even divine intervention, vice versa. I mean, through Bert's journey, I've been able to learn because of his willingness. I've been able to apply new strategies, new techniques, as well as, engaging and becoming a part of healing seekers. And so I wanted to speak to the fact that, the a community mindset is really what emerged from your journey. And it's like, the biggest thing is this didn't exist. And so Bert saw a need and said, this has to be created outside of just addiction. It needs to be created so that people can utilize some of these tools and strategies towards healing as a whole, and healing from chronic illness, from so many things. And when he mentioned it to me, I know that he was like, I'm a little bit hesitant. I was like, no, like this needs to happen. And even in my own spiritual background and, in church, they have groups for marriage and counseling for divorce and groups for all these things, but there's no group for healing. And community, as you had expressed, was a big reason why you were able to, endure recovery and addiction and all those things. And so at what point did you realize that you weren't meant to walk through this journey ultimately alone?
In 2021, I started attending some Hawkins groups, Dr. David Hawkins, and reading his books. He was friends with Bill Wilson, who founded AA. And that really helped me get back on track as far as my spiritual journey. And I guess that was a turning point in 2020, 2021. And of course, meeting weekly with Mr. Hardman also.
Yeah, and I mean, and you guys can't see it maybe, but there's a big stack of books behind Bert today, and a lot of those are Dr. David Hawkins books. And if anybody has had an opportunity to read through some of those, I mean, the thought processes, the connections you make, it's almost outer body experiences learning through, because you make such deep, profound connections. And so I just can't overextend how much that, I guess, plays into healing seekers as well, as seeing that, hey, there's a need for this. And so, obviously somebody that has struggled with chronic illness, you saw ultimately an opportunity for healing seekers. And what does healing seekers, I guess, provide in like, let's say, even community prayer? Like, why is that so specifically important to you?
Community prayer tends to allow us to all to tune in at the same frequency. It's a higher healing frequency that we find present in AA groups and healing seekers. And just being a part of that, you feel that deep within. And also, you don't feel so alone because you see other people struggling with the same thing that you might be struggling with or did struggle with. So either you're there to help others or you're there to receive help from others. It really doesn't matter. It forms a strong community bond so that people can see that they don't have to do this alone.
Yeah. And it's so safe and non-judgmental, because so many of us have potentially experienced our own, challenges within our health. And and our life. And so it's such a different layer, because it's not like you're just going to a talk therapist or somebody that is trying to support you. It's literally people that have lived it, and you can connect with their stories and apply, and apply a lot of the healing, the resources that we offer through healing seekers. So if anyone is listening and they're feeling isolated, exhausted, or like they're carrying their illness alone, you're not imagining that weight. So, Bert, what would you say to someone who's listening who wants maybe that spiritual support but feels hesitant or even unworthy?
I would say I can definitely relate. I was at an absolute low point in 2020, and it wasn't until I started going to some groups. The group, the Hawkins group that I went to, wasn't necessarily a healing group. It was just more or less reading the books, but it still provided a sense of community. And that's when my thinking started to change about what is my purpose in life? Why is this happening to me? Why am I so sick? How do I fix this? How do I stop this? So, a turning point for me was to become involved in a group where I could share openly and also listen to other people share, because I could relate on a very deep level with everything that was being said.
And that's honestly the most beautiful thing, that you saw opportunity. And so, do people need a strong faith to join, or just an open heart in this community, in this group?
I think just being no, a strong faith is never a requirement for a group like this. As a matter of fact, other things, other intangible spiritual qualities, or just a level of willingness and the desire to find help, are far more important than any spiritual background or religious training.
Yeah. And it's, from myself being a part of the healing seekers group, I know it's, you're the founder. We have Yule, and we also have a clinical psychologist, Karen. We have a student of divinity, Caroline. So there's a lot of group leaders that ultimately are supporting and guiding the meetings, because for those of us maybe that are experiencing and would like to potentially join, or like, how is that, experience, let's say if you were to come to healing seekers for the first time, what would that look like for a listener?
You would just register to come to the group. We would send you a Zoom link. And during the meeting, we would start it with a guided meditation, which is optional, say an opening prayer. And there'd be a brief presentation, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, on some type of spiritual topic or healing topic or naturopathic topic. And then we would go around the room, so to speak, and introduce ourselves to the new member. And then the other people would share first about how their previous week went. And then we would get to the new member, and we would, ask some questions to try to learn a little bit about the background and what they might be struggling with, and just try to get a feel of their perspective and where they're at, emotionally, spiritually,
Physically, yeah.
physically, and try to welcome them and make them feel a part of the group. So that would be a description of the initial
Yeah,
experience.
I love the flow. And so this would be a live engagement. So typically you can do this from anywhere around the world. You can join in at that recommended time. So it's once weekly, but there are ideas and thoughts of expanding into other groups and other dates and times. But as of right now, I know that we meet on Thursday evenings. The guided meditations at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But the group is from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's about 1 hour. And as Bert explained, there is what we call a devotion, which I think is beautiful. I love the way we call it a devotion, because we are ultimately utilizing a lot of our resources, whether it's the clinical psychologist, myself, the naturopath, or Yule in his spiritual background, and just kind of giving some guidance and food for thought. Literally, like we're ultimately explaining and teaching. So I think that it's such a multifaceted approach, because it's coming with spiritual connection, emotional connection, and there is that physical, because there's always this feeling of knowing that there's a community that's there for you. And so many of our clients that join in, it's like they can't wait till Thursday evening to gather and know that, all of their hardships or conversations that maybe others in their current dynamic would not recognize or understand or appreciate. There is a place for that, right? To come and celebrate your wins or discuss the hardships so that, it's out there and your body is listening, right? So as a mind body practitioner, I think it's so critical to be able to speak some of your truths and what's happening so that your body can then recognize it and move in the appropriate direction towards healing, right? Because so many times, a lot of our symptoms that we experience is just the body's way of talking to us, right? And so if we keep pushing it down and pushing it down, we're never necessarily going to break through to healing. We're just trying to ultimately store up a lot of that to lead us to a more chronic or debilitating condition later on. So we meet weekly. It's live, so it's something you can do virtually. And I guess I'm curious a little bit about what transformations you yourself, Burt, have witnessed, not just physically, but emotionally or spiritually for maybe some of those people that have joined in our groups.
Absolutely. Every group member that we've had, maybe not every group member, but most group members, especially the first few group members, came in and they were just so upset about their situation. They didn't feel like they could get better. Their outlook on life was hopeless to a large degree, and they were really struggling emotionally on a daily basis just to perform the basic tasks. So their life had shrunken so that it was very small. Well, what we've noticed is people that attend the groups regularly and participate in the groups and share openly and honestly, what we've noticed after just a few months, maybe 2 or 3 months, that there's the victimization and the outlook on life certainly shifts. And it not only does it shifts dramatically. It's like you see people that were struggling and just torn up about their daily routine and what might happen in the future. You see people sharing very positively, even if their symptoms are still the same. They know that there's a purpose. They understand that this sickness is not meant to harm, it's meant to transform. It's meant to be the gateway or the doorway into a healthier, happier life, even one that was better than before. So that is the miracle that we see. And then ultimately, if this process continues long enough, the body will reflect what is held in the mind. And you can see the spirit change. You can see them being lifted up. So it is a very marvelous thing to witness.
You see it and you feel it. It's like this ripple effect. And as you expressed, maybe their ailments are still present, but their outlook, their connection to their illness, everything just shifts. And with that, the mind and the body being in sync. And I think that that's the biggest difference is that awareness that comes with community, with talking about it and making those connections. Obviously myself being a naturopathic provider, I ultimately try to come in, engage and support with, okay, as much as we're getting the mind, we want to get the body to catch up as well. And so some of those strategies that I support with is the functional medicine side and some of those other strategies as guidance to, and as always offered to any of those clients that we have regularly joining. And I have seen it firsthand as well. And I would say that Burt's journey and his healing story itself is such a big aspect to why I felt so inclined to join. And I feel like it was really something missing in my own practice was that spiritual connection and offering to patients, because it's almost like I could help them physically, read through the labs and support them with supplementation and diet and lifestyle. But realistically speaking, you as a person have to be ready and willing. And so that was really where I have seen that extending healing seekers to any of my clients has really opened up their healing and their trajectory so much so. So I'm just beyond grateful. So if someone is listening right now and is feeling called to join, like as you had expressed, the next gentle steps would include getting, on our email list. So you can always feel free to email myself directly or look at healingseekers.com. And that's somewhere where you can maybe just explore what Healing Seekers is. No, without pressure, just looking in and seeing like, okay, what exactly is this? And how can I potentially explore this as an option for me? We ultimately look at our resources as an open door. It's just like, hey, it's here. And, if you feel called to action, then that's where you would go. And you could be joining us on a weekly basis from wherever you are, and allowing that time to be honed in on you and your healing and your journey, and kind of layering in those perspectives.
Absolutely. No, that's correct. The website is healingseekers.org. O-R-G. I think you might have said com.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
it
good.
is healingseekers.org. And you are absolutely correct. Thank you.
And I mean, realistically speaking, as Bert has expressed, it is a process. I think so many of us are so familiar with going to the gym and working out to lose weight or gain muscle. And we forget that our mind and our whole neurological system is also needs to be trained. And so it takes time, it takes some resiliency. It's not going to happen overnight. And so, that's why Bert had expressed a lot of those shifts happening in several months after joining the group. And partly as to why is because the mind has to catch up and has to kind of recognize that you're aware. And so it's such a beautiful process, and to see people really commit is really what I think makes the biggest difference. And and even when Bert met with me at our first visit, I said, there's something different. And then he kind of expressed his journey with healing and really what that entailed. And it stood out so much to me that I said, well, what is this? And it was even in our process though, right, Bert, that you had become the founder and expanded into this and trying to create this, ultimately this nonprofit for anybody that's potentially seeking healing.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I was very sick when I came to see you. I had hardly been able to view it as an opportunity for spiritual growth to a large degree, but there was no thought of healing seekers until later on in our process, July 2024. That's really when I started feeling much, much better. So you are a big part of that process, and I cannot understate the importance of all the treatments and all the caring, loving ways that you interacted with me and helped me. It was a very, very delicate time in my journey, and the synchronicity was off the charts. And I was very receptive to everything you said, because ultimately I had not had good luck in the past with accepting direction from myself. It had gotten me in a lot of difficulties, addiction, and so forth. And it's not something that you can find your way out of by yourself. And chronic sickness is really no different. Maybe here and there people can pull themselves out of it by themselves, but it's probably not the process that you want to try to rely on. And I had a very, very strong awareness of that. So I dedicated that time in my life to following Dr. Adelena Izal's suggestions, even when it was tough, even when it was painful, even when I would get sicker, knowing that this was part of the process.
And being such a mind body like individual, I mean, that's really what the layer of functional medicine and even that naturopathic approach, what it made sense, right? As long as we had those objective trackers, like when we were reviewing, let's say, the stool analysis together, and we talked about the steps of where there were some alterations or imbalances, and how our approaches to our strategies. It was always a conversation on does this sound like a good plan? And obviously Bert was always like, whatever you say, which was like obviously amazing to have that. But it was also like, he always speaks to the love and the compassion that he had experienced from our time together, because realistically speaking, to me, this is just who I am. But that wasn't his experience to date. I mean, he's worked with providers, he's had surgical consults and GI and this doctor and this, he's been on that carousel for so long that he forgot what it almost felt like to connect with someone within the process. Would you agree?
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, I struggled with that for years, and I saw doctors that ranged up and down the spectrum. Some paid attention, some were somewhat loving, some were very intellectual, and you have to do this and that and the other. But I had never experienced anything like I did when I went to see you.
It
I mean,
was
you gave your full heart. You dedicated your life to helping others, and that shone through by the way that you conducted yourself and interacted with me and helped me. So that is a healing dimension that's not easily quantifiable, but the results are absolutely remarkable. So thank you for that.
Well, and as I always say, thank you, Bert, because you've obviously, like I said, expanded so much of my faith in the mind body practices and connection of really what it takes to heal. You can take all the supplements all day long, but if it doesn't make sense, if you don't know why you're making these shifts, and that's where functional medicine helped guide us in our strategies so that we could ultimately persevere and push through. It wasn't just hope and trust in me as a provider, it was, these are the steps and this is kind of what this is illustrating. So it was the explanation, it was the teaching to almost reinforce your efforts, because you knew that you were capable of healing, but you just didn't know which avenue or path to go down. And obviously we're very grateful for the provider that had linked us together and said you should work with a naturopath, and you're
Yeah.
kind of like, what is this? And we had met, and we've, and I don't want to underplay how challenging some of our journey was. I mean, realistically speaking, we had to change everything Bert was ultimately doing, the way he was eating, the way he was moving, the way the supplements recommendations. We had to make valuable connections not only for those short periods in time, but also here on extending into your health healing journey to date. I mean, it's a work in progress. And so as much as, we seek like healing and that word, but we understand that it's an ongoing process. And that's where I even feel that Healing Seekers comes in to help highlight that and keep people engaged in the process, even when it gets hard. Wouldn't you agree, Bert?
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. I know Healing Seekers has helped me immensely, although I was feeling much, much better. Just a 50% improvement from being low like that would have been a remarkable change for me. To say that I have improved over the last year and a half is an understatement, because I have improved not only in my physical health and being able to tolerate foods and eat different foods and feel better and sleep better and live life to the fullest, but my spiritual life has expanded. I've seen improvements in all my relationships. I don't feel wounded like I did at one time when I was sick.
And
And
even
I haven't felt that way for a long time. And that is so important.
I'm just saying that even just sharing your story, I mean, and that's the beautiful thing about Bert is his vulnerability and the fact that he doesn't look at it, as you just expressed, a wound. He doesn't look at it as a bad thing. He's like, this is me. This is what I endured. This is where I am. And we know that there's only growth from here because you're recognizing your past selves and those dimensions that led us to where we are. And you're letting them go in a sense to make space for what's to come. And I think that was the most beautiful thing about Bert is that he never came across like feeling like, he would share his story openly and, without worry of judgment, because he's already accepted where he is in his journey. And I think that that's such a, even within Healing Seekers, we try to provide an avenue or a window for people to share their story, because not everybody can even potentially have the opportunity to work with a naturopath and expand into that. But, there might be thoughts and connections that they make even just by telling their story and their journey within that group setting that allows them to really have those, what I would call like aha moments, right? Like you see, and I see it in my office every day. And I felt it so much with Bert. It's just those connections, that lack of understanding, it starts to become like that awareness. They start to be like, wow, I didn't realize that me sharing a story about my relationship with my dad, I'm just making an example, and how that could connect to my healing, right? And so it's so beautiful how allowing that space, allowing a safe place without judgment and just really like acknowledging. I think that that's what's the most beautiful thing, is because we've all been a part of the healthcare system where you feel looked over, where you feel like you're the problem. And this is, as opposed to looking at it from a different lens, which is, this is what makes you you. And we just have to acknowledge it and then pivot to support maybe where you are in this present moment. So, and Bert knows I could talk all day, especially when it comes to Healing Seekers, but I wanted to just kind of pivot ever slightly and just speak to even how Bert had extended Healing Seekers to me. He said, hey, Dr. Adelena, I'm starting this nonprofit. And to me, he had shared that during IV infusion. He was getting his vitamins, and he's just like, I'm really thinking about pursuing this with all these different members. Are you interested? And I think that he felt nervous to even mention it to me because he was going to, ultimately get shut down. Oh, I can't, I'm a doctor. I'm too busy. And to me, it was like, at first I was a little bit scared of just like the demand that it would take, not only time wise, but more so emotionally, in the sense that sometimes being an empath and feeling that connection, but it has expanded my growth and even recognizing my healing and the journey that I've had to endure to even find naturopathic medicine. So I'm beyond grateful and thankful for Healing Seekers, because I knew that there was a layer in my own practice and in my own ways of supporting patients that was lacking. Like, it almost felt like, we don't talk about the spirit. We talk about the mental, emotional, we talk about the physical, but nobody really talks about the spiritual, right? And that was the layer that Burt had, and he brought to me and he said, "No, Dr. Adelina, this is something that is so, you know, profound in someone's healing, that if you don't touch on it, you're missing a whole window of healing for patients." So I am beyond grateful for Healing Seekers in that avenue, but I'm not sure if you want to touch or speak on any of that as well, Bert.
No, and I appreciate you expressing your gratefulness for Healing Seekers. And of course, we love having you there. I will touch on that because that is a very important aspect, what you're talking about, the spiritual part of it. One of the things that stands out to me, and it goes with the theme that you're talking about, is forgiveness. And we hear a lot about that in church and spiritual circles and stuff. But I was not really aware of how much guilt I was carrying over being sick. And the reason I was carrying a lot of guilt is because I was letting everybody down around me. And I was able to, to provide for my family, but I was not able to provide the emotional support they needed. My parents were worried about me. My brother and sister were worried about me. My friends, a lot of them didn't think I was going to make it on this earth much longer. And that's not what I wanted to happen. I wanted to be well. I wanted to feel better, but I didn't realize that the guilt that I was carrying was one of the main blocks that was preventing me from getting better. And that, this varies from person to person. So I had to get to a point where I was willing to forgive myself and find a positive path forward. And that's a little bit about what I touched on earlier. And I finally got to the point where I had surrendered all these negative emotions that had been dammed up for years because of, just one bad day after the other. I was worried. I just knew the other shoe would drop, and it always did. So it was just a ongoing process of pain and agony and suffering. And I don't really know how it all happened, but the prayer and the spiritual work that I did during the time leading up to when I got relief, I was able to let go of most, if not all, of those dammed up negative emotions. And this happened very quickly. It kind of happened automatically. It wasn't something that I tried to trigger inside myself. I was just willing, and I tried to place myself in a position of being willing to surrender whatever I needed to surrender. So that was an extreme turning point. And as soon as I was able to do that, the neurotransmitters that had been depleted by having all these bowel surgeries and damaging the brain gut axis and so forth, I mean, I was just in a state for so long where I was emotionally numb and not feeling life and just existing from one minute to the next instantaneously. When those dammed up emotions were released, I knew that life had changed forever. And I knew also that it was my purpose to try to help people who were in a similar position where it just seemed like there was no hope and there was no way to find their way out of the box, because I had felt those same emotions for so long. So Healing Seekers helps us with that. It helped me.
Teary-eyed over here, just so that just because I guess it's very challenging, because I don't think a lot of, obviously, if anyone's viewing this podcast right now, obviously they're listening in, but viewing, and they see this man in front of them, they wouldn't necessarily understand the amount of shift that it really has taken to you physically to even, you know, clearly express the way that you're feeling in these during these episodes. And I really think that the willingness to try, and I think that that has been the biggest thing that has shifted, is that you have decided to stop coasting through life through like, and like you had expressed, potentially being even the victim in that scenario. If I'm sick and this is my, you shifted it to say, well, I'm trying to be better. And it's almost like that willingness and that consistency has ultimately had that ripple effect and allowed so many those around you to almost, who previously felt sorry for you, felt inspired by you, because they're like, wow, whatever you're doing, I want to do it too, right? And I think that that's really why Healing Seekers is so profound, is because it can also, as much through our own healing stories, it's so inspiring to others to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes we lose sight of the light at the end because we're so inundated with our day to day, and we do want somebody to listen to us. We do want somebody to recognize and maybe make those connections to why I'm feeling that way. And that's why I love and chose naturopathic medicine, was through my own healing journey and story. And I mean, I have expressed and shared that through Healing Seekers, that I also went through, a healing episode early on in life where there was little to no guidance. It was just like, this is the rest of your life, and it was ultimately like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. And so it took me out of the equation, right? And so I had to learn, and I found naturopathic medicine to put myself back in the equation and ultimately take back my own life, right? Become autonomous with my own decisions and what I eat and how I move, and what I guess visualize for myself, right? Did I see myself being on prescriptive medications the rest of my life and accepting that at any given day I could have an episode of some sort? Like, no, I ultimately tried, right? I had to engage. I had to become a part of the of the whole system, right? I had to say, this is my body, right? And I know it best. And that's always where, when Bert always says I am approaching my clients and my patients with an open heart, it comes from ultimately wanting what I ultimately wasn't provided during my own healing journey. It was somebody that just listens, somebody that can recognize that what you're going through is difficult, and you're doing the right steps, and kind of, I guess, validating our efforts. And so that's where I feel like Healing Seekers does that for the spirit, and it helps us kind of better understand, as Bert has so eloquently expressed in his healing journey. He looked at it as not a flaw, not something that ultimately had led him down, but he looked at it as an opportunity. He was like, okay, well, I saw where I have grown through AA, and even with your spiritual background with Yule, like you were like, well, how can we offer this to other people so that they can expand into their healing and connection to that spirit that's so oftentimes overlooked in ultimately really the Western models of things, and I think a lot of people, even members that we have, Bert, have had negative experiences with spiritual guidance in the past, right? Maybe they've gone through different religions. And that's what I want to make abundantly clear, is this is not a religious group. It's recognizing that there is spirit, and having your mind, your body, and your spirit in sync really helps you, move forward down that to the light, really. If you would like to expand on that, because I know that that's kind of a, you know, ingrained fear that maybe some individuals can have, that when they think of a healing group, especially when it comes to spirit, they might think religion.
Oh, absolutely. And we're definitely not a religious group. It's a spiritual group. We focus on spiritual principles, and spiritual principles transcend and are in common with all of the major religions, and that would be love and compassion and understanding and faith and hope and perseverance and acceptance and forgiveness. Those are the things that are very important, because we can all talk about those in light of our own experiences and relate without judgment. Nobody's trying to tell anybody what to think or how to feel or what to believe. Everyone has the opportunity and the openness to do that at their own level. We're just trying to hold space for people to share openly and validate their emotions. We do have a devotional time, but it is not religious instruction. It is on spiritual principles and how they work, and how love works, and self-forgiveness and compassion, like I say. So I understand there may be some confusion there, but it is not a religious group.
Yeah.
It is purely a spiritual group.
And anybody from any religion is welcome, is what ultimately we're saying.
Yes.
No religion or religion, you're welcome, because realistically speaking, we are touching on those profound connections. I mean, what he had just expressed about love and compassion, and it's love for others and it's love for self. And I really think that that's something that we touch on and talk about. And so I just hope, even through, Burt and I can talk for hours about healing and go down different, quantum physics and all these different connections. And it's just like, to me, the biggest eye opening is when I joined the group. It was like, oh my gosh, there's other people like me, right? It was like, this makes sense. I don't know why it's not more mainstream to have these resources available for individuals. As I expressed, there's all these, support groups for XYZ, but there's not one for really healing, and maybe those that are in the trenches of even the downs or even the ups. Well, how do we navigate this to sustain this trajectory or shift it? And so I just am beyond grateful to be a part of this amazing group. And so, as Burt has so easily expressed previously, is that if you go to healingseekers.org, O-R-G, you are able to then just learn a little bit more about the group, learn a little bit more about how to join. I believe, we do different devotions every week, but that guided meditation, I mean, even if you jump in just for that 30-minute meditative group, you can kind of get an idea of, what we're trying to support is that mind and body ultimate connection. Okay. And so, for anyone's looking for an opportunity to join, I urge you so much to look into Healing Seekers, because it has been a profound shift in so many of our clients' life, but even self, right? We really want you to feel heard. And, I wasn't sure if potentially, and I don't want to put Burt on the spot, but if you would like to, potentially do a closing prayer by chance for all of us on this group, just to get an idea of what that looks like. It doesn't have to be anything eloquent. It can be short and brief, but just so that we can close out this podcast for those that maybe this is their first step, right? Just even knowing that there is something like this available, right? And for any of the past listeners that worked with Dr. Mary, who was the founder of Full Circle Health, she had such an amazing call to action when it came to spiritual guidance. She would pray over her patients. She would read Bible verses during her presentations and radio shows. And I just feel like Dr. Mary's always with me when I oversee my patients. And so there's that extra layer that she provided that I felt like I wasn't capable, in a sense. And so being a part of Healing Seekers has, really removed that doubt from me and said, no, like, this is where you're meant to be. And this is what what your purpose is as a healing provider, is to provide all those resources, and, and spiritual being one. So I'm beyond grateful. And so, Burt, if it's okay with you, feel free to close us in prayer, or if you have any added statements, this is your time.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you having me, Dr. Isold, and I appreciate our time together. And I'll say a quick prayer, sort of in the same format we would use in Healing Seekers. Heavenly Father, source of all life and love, we gather here in humility and gratitude, opening our hearts to your healing presence. We invite your light to fill this space, dissolving fear, releasing resistance, and restoring us to peace. Today we pray earnestly for knowledge of your will and the power to carry it out. Please guide our minds to truth, our hearts to compassion, and our spirits to surrender. Please direct us as we gather together, attuned to the same field, toward the common goal of healing in this present time and the coming year. We place ourselves in your care, knowing that true healing comes not by our will alone, but by aligning with your higher power and infinite wisdom. Thank you so much for the time together today with Dr. Isold, and we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Burt. And just as you all heard, Burt's a busy man. So he took time to come here today and join us on our Third Opinion podcast to just extend this amazing, amazing resource. And so I urge you to just go and learn more, and you can always reach out to me directly and we can talk about it and see if this is something that you're ready for ultimately. So I'm very grateful, Burt. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And I know that we're meeting several times this week, so I'll see lots of you, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you again. Thank you so much for having me. I
Yes.
enjoyed it.